This is Tuesday, March 11th, and I will call to order the informational meeting of the City Council, and we'll proceed right into the agenda. At this point in time, I'm going to ask, is there any, we only have one presentation on the agenda for today, and I'm really looking forward to it, but is there any City Council open discussion at this time? Councilor Anderson, please.
After the informational meeting is over, we will be having a public services meeting. On the agenda is a vehicle for hire ordinance. We plan on taking more public testimony especially from the cab owners, and then we hope we'll hear some more from the administration on how this ordinance will be enforced.
Good. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. At this point in time, I'd like to take and move right into the presentations. Or was there anybody else had anything else on open discussion? Yes, Councilor Karski.
Yes, you'll notice on tonight's regular agenda, the last item, I'm going to be making a motion to reconsider the motion last week on the TIF ordinance that we are considering. And I'm doing that because we are going to have a council working session here in the next month, I guess, month from today, actually, I believe. And there's just so many things going on there. I feel it's best that we have an open discussion as a working session before we have anything voted on at that meeting. So that'll be my motion tonight, just to defer that. So two motions there, one to reconsider it and then the motion to defer. So appreciate your support on that.
Good. And I have scheduled a council work session talking with Councilor Karski. There are several things that have come up that we need to look at. One of them is the TIF, and the other one is a Prairie Meadows annexation with Councilor Rolfing in his committee, land use, talking about special assessments, the annexation and special assessment ordinance that Tracy and his team have been working on. And then also, I do believe we're going to have some good information today from Tracy in his report. And there hopefully will be a surplus, I believe. He kind of led us to believe there's going to be a surplus at the meeting we had on Friday. And we'll use this time then to discuss that surplus also. And that working session will be on Thursday, April 10th. Is there any other open discussion at this time? Please, Councilor.
Yeah,
Councilor Staggers, please.
Taking a look here, I was trying to find the items which I had flagged for pulling from the consent calendar. And well, anyway, I had the line parks improvements at $353,379. Also had the asphalt street rehabilitation at $818,564. And there was one other one. But anyway, I did have three to have pulled from the consent agenda.
Yep, Councilor Staggers, we actually have a list. It's not on the red notes, but we did provide a list for the mayor and also for Denise Tucker, who will be clerking tonight's meeting. We only included the two because the third one, I think we just took it as an informational request. That was the, I believe it was the micro seal item that was with various surrounding towns. And but we can definitely, if you want to pull that item too, we could add that to the list.
Yeah, that was the one where we had a number of different communities involved, right?
Yep, Hartford, Brandon, I believe, are those two other communities.
And, well, maybe can you just briefly say what that was about?
No, I didn't really look at it. From what I remember from those comments that came from Mark Cotter is that those payments will be made directly from those communities to the contractor. The City of Sioux Falls will not subsidize the cities of Brandon or Hartford. It's just a way to, it's the economy of scale. The more square miles of road that will be micro-sealed, the better the price will be. And so it's a win-win situation for both the City of Sioux Falls and Brandon. So.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yep, you bet.
Good. Is that good, Councilor Staggers?
Yeah.
Good, Kermit. Good. Anything else this time? At this time, Tracy would come forward. Tracy Turback is going to give us our 2013 year-end financial report. Thank you, Tracy.
Good afternoon. Tracy Turback. At least two of us have been looking forward to this. Hopefully more of you. I know I do all the time, or every year. Look forward to coming and reporting the year-end results. Before I jump into the presentation, I do want to commend my finance team. They've just really done an exceptional job again this year in pulling the year information together, all in the kind of at the same time we're implementing a new financial management system. As many of you know, shortly after the first of the year, we went live on our new accounting system, new software system, and so that has been really kind of the culmination of a monumental effort to bring that project to fruition. And if you've ever been through something like that, you know that not everything settles into a normal process on day one. It takes several months to work through that and get into more of a normal function. So the last couple of months or so have been really very, very busy for the finance team, but they did rise to the occasion and got our year-end books closed. And I want to thank you folks as well for your patience. We're a little bit later this year than what we would prefer to be, but that's just kind of part of the game. Normally we will wait till the audit, our independent audit, is nearly finished, so we can be confident in the numbers we're going to present to you, and that we are at that point now. The independent audit conducted by I. Bailey is nearly completed. They've got a little bit of work left to do yet. So the audited financial statements we do anticipate would be issued yet before the end of this month. So until it's completed, I would just point out that the financial data in the report that you received as of December 31st and the information I'll present today really should be considered as preliminary. It's still subject to change until the audit is, the ink is on the audit, and although we don't anticipate any further changes, that's always a possibility. 2013 was another very good year for the City of Sioux Falls. The local economy certainly is very robust and growing. Operationally, it was a good year as well, in spite of a significant bump in the road that we hit last April in the ice storm. That kept us quite busy through much of the year, and certainly had some financial impacts that you folks are already familiar with. The city team was very busy executing the capital program throughout 2013, and I'll touch on that in this report. And it was a very good year again for our utility funds as well, all 5 of our enterprise funds. So with that, just an overview of the presentation today. As I always do, we'll review some of the economic indicators before we get into the financial results, and we'll cover really the lion's share of all of the city's operation from a financial perspective when we cover the general fund, the capital program, and our enterprise activities. So we really cover a pretty wide range and a major portion of the city's operation. I also have a few comments I'd like to make about city debt, and then before I wrap it up, we'll share some thoughts about what's coming this year and in the future. It has been a while since I've been before you. It's been a couple of months at least, so I'd like to start out by getting kind of caught up on where we ended the year in terms of our economic indicators. As we always do, looking at the local employment or unemployment figures here in the Sioux Falls MSA. This graphic reflects a 3-year time frame. The top line, which looks purple to me, if you're not colorblind, it might look totally different, but the top line represents 2011, and you can see 3 years ago, when we started 2011, the unemployment rate here locally was at 5.4%. By the end of the year, it had fallen to 4.3%. The middle line is 2012, and you can see by the end of 2012, unemployment locally was at 4%. And of course, the bottom line being 2013, you can see that we ended the year last year at an unemployment rate of 3.1%. So it has just gotten progressively stronger as the last several years have gone by. And so we're certainly recognizing that as a very positive economic indicator for our local economy. By comparison, the state State of South Dakota ended 2013 with a very good unemployment rate as well at 3.6%, and the national rate was at 6.5%. You folks are well aware that 2013 was really an exceptional year in terms of the construction activity that we saw. You might say it was a breakout year for the construction community here. It was really a strong year across all categories. We saw significant increases in permits issued for manufacturing and commercial properties, and residential construction was especially strong, both in the single-family and multifamily housing permits issued. You can see by the numbers that 2012 was certainly a very good year, but as good as 2012 was, 2013 was just really an incredible year. In fact, the value of permits issued hit a new all-time high at over $588 million. I would point out, too, that number includes a portion of the event center project. I know some of you are interested in that. The value, the portion of that $588 million that relates to the event center is $32 million. So even without that project in there, 2013 would have been a record-setting year, the highest year ever. Our general sales taxes continue to grow. This graphic shows you a 2-year time frame from the end of 2011 to the end of 2013. You can see that for the first 18 months or so of that 24-month period, sales tax collections continued to grow at a pretty steady rate, right around 5%. And then last spring, the pace of growth really began to pick up, and we ended the year at a very strong growth rate of 8%. As we always do, we like to compare that with our entertainment tax revenues from the entertainment tax, more as a reflection of what we would consider discretionary spending. And you can see here the 2012 was actually a bit stronger in terms of the rate of growth. We did see very good growth throughout 2013 and ended the year up 5.7% over the prior year collection. So another very good year, but it's kind of interesting that those growth rates flip-flopped a little bit. In 2012, the entertainment tax was growing at a faster clip, and in 2013, our general sales tax really picked up the pace and outpaced our entertainment taxes. So with that as kind of the backdrop from an economic standpoint, I'll jump into the presentation on the 2013 financial results and cover some of the highlights. We'll cover the general fund as our primary operating account. As I mentioned, we'll also touch on the capital program, the enterprise activities, and city debt as well. For the general fund, some of the highlights I'd like to mention to you today, and particularly in regard to the revenues, our property tax revenues continued to be very stable, up 4.4% in 2013, which is right on track with what was budgeted as an increase in 2013. Sales tax revenues up 7.7% over 2012. If you factor in the effect of the audits, 8% is the ongoing growth rate of our general sales tax. So about $1.7 million over budget on what we had anticipated for our general fund sales tax revenues. With all that construction activity taking place, we did see a spike up in our permitting revenues, driven by that $588 million in permits issued. We did exceed our budget estimates by more than $700,000 in the building permit fees that were taken in. And liquor licenses were kind of an anomaly last year. We saw all of the remaining on-sale liquor licenses that we had in inventory get sold last year, and so our revenue generated from the sale of liquor licenses exceeded what we had budgeted for 2013 by $1.2 million. So that was a kind of a one-time shot in the arm because next year we won't have those to sell again, or this year I should say. On the expenditure side for the general fund, we saw all of the departments really exercise some very, very good, very effective, prudent budgetary management. We've worked hard with all the departments in recent years to get their budgets at the appropriate level, and I have to really give a lot of credit to the directors and their teams in effectively managing their budgets. For the general fund, the amount of budget remaining at the end of the year was 1.6%. So that's pretty effective use of the resources that they're given to run their departments. And of course, the ice storm, as I mentioned, we managed to weather that effectively, and we're very aggressive in minimizing the costs of that response and recovery and clean up that ice storm, as well as recovering as much of the cost that we could through the opportunities that we had for federal and state funding. Looking at the general fund balance, I know that's something that you folks are always keenly interested in. We did start the year of 2013 with available general fund balance of $45.2 million. You can see the revenues and expenditures. Revenues exceeded expenditures by just under $400,000 in 2013, and after adjusting the restricted portion of our fund balance, we ended the year with $45.8 million in our general fund balance that's available. And we always measure that against the budgeted expenditures. So at the end of 2013, that $45.8 million in reserves represents 32.3% of the 2013 budget. Looking at that percentage on a historical basis, you can see over the last 10 years kind of how we've gone up and down, staying well above the 25% policy targeted minimum that the council established some years ago. So we finished 2013, as I said, at 32.3%, well above that 25% targeted minimum. Moving now to the capital program. As I said, it was a very busy year. The teams were extremely busy executing the capital program that the council had approved. The total investment in the capital program in 2013 was over $129 million. There were 70 projects that were substantially completed during the year, and another 98 projects that were active and then at some stage of construction throughout the year. The focus of the program has been, and I expect will continue to be, improving traffic flow. That's always a priority. By expanding and rebuilding streets and intersections, we'll continue to, as you can see in 13, continue to invest in quality of life improvements like some of those mentioned on the slide. Neighborhood parks, building new neighborhood parks. Prairie West Branch Library was completed last year and is now open for business. And some of the Prairie Green and Keene golf course clubhouses were improved. And of course, we continued with some other important investments like the flood control levee system and of course, the Denny Sanford Premier Center that's under construction. At the end of December 2013, the available balance in the capital fund is $11.5 million. That includes the $9.8 million reimbursement payment that was received late last year, in the last quarter of last year from the Corps of Engineers. So that money is sitting in the capital fund and is part of that $11.5 million. I should point out too that there was a small amount of the surplus that the council has already appropriated in 14. You'll recall, I believe it was in January, you approved a supplemental appropriation of $350,000, I think it was, that represented the amount of platting fees that had been collected in 13 over and above what had been anticipated in the budget. So a portion of that $11.5 million has already been appropriated this year by you folks. But if we if we take out, deduct that amount and the reimbursement from the Corps, you would have about $1.4 million of what you might think of as the normal surplus that's still available to be appropriated. Some of the fun stuff to look at the actual photos of some of the improvements that were made or executed this year. These are the new Prairie Green and the former Prairie Green clubhouse that was moved to the Keene Golf Course. Some of the recreational and cultural improvements, Prairie West Library, and a photo of one of the neighborhood parks. You can see some of the focus on streets, of course, the Benson Road improvement up north, and the really nice improvements that were made to 6th Street downtown here. That was certainly needed improvements. Down on 57th Street in Western, some significant improvements to improve traffic flow down there. Some of the improvements on Highway 11, Western Avenue, and then one of the major sanitary sewer system improvements, that Sioux River South Interceptor project as well. And then, of course, the event center that will be opening this fall. You folks get updated on a regular basis. Looking at our enterprises, we maintain 5 enterprise funds for our utilities, what we refer to as enterprise funds. All 5 had a very good year. We look at these, they're accounted for more along the lines of what a private or profit-oriented business would be. The focus here really is the cash flow, and we look particularly at the cash flows that are generated from operations. That's a good measuring stick to determine whether or not we're generating the kind of revenues we need from these systems to maintain the systems and keep up with the improvements that are necessary. So you can see all 5 had positive cash flows from our operations. Light and Power had $1.4 million, public parking $200,000. The landfill had $3.6 million positive cash flow from operations, and then the water and the water rec fund at $19 and $15 million respectively. So very good years for all those enterprise funds. And I might mention too that we're in the 2nd year of a 2-year rate model, so we'll be updating that the utility rates before the end of this year. All that analysis will happen between now and the end of the year, and a new 2-year rate ordinance will come before you folks once that process is completed. I did want to, as I mentioned, make a few comments about city debt. I know that's a frequent topic of discussion. It is certainly a very important topic. You might recall, those of you on the fiscal committee anyway, may recall that last fall we had a pretty good discussion on city debt and the different forms of city debt, why we issue bonds, for what kinds of projects, talked about how well they're managed, how we measure some of those issues related to city debt. But it continues to be a topic of conversation, and I think that's good. One of the most pertinent questions I think that I hear is the city's debt manageable? Can we really afford what we have? Can we make the payments? Is it hindering the city operation in any way? And there are a lot of different ways to evaluate that, and many different ways to measure that. You can look at it in terms of the amount of payments that we're making on our debt each year relative to the overall budget. You can look at our bond ratings to make a judgment about that. You can look at how quickly we're paying down the principal, how much of the outstanding debt today will be paid off in 5 years. That's another way to measure that. There are debt service coverage ratios, which is something that's very key to us. We look at that very carefully. The council actually has a policy on that relative to our sales tax debt. And there are just really a host, or a large variety of other financial ratios that you can utilize to measure, engage, and draw comparisons or conclusions about city debt. You'll find some of the more relevant ones, I think, in the report recently issued by our internal audit department. They evaluated the year-end figures from 2012 and have just recently issued their financial condition analysis. And they really come to the conclusion on all the measurements that they took that we compare very favorably with other cities of similar size, and we also compare very favorably with some of the standard financial benchmarks that they chose to look at. So those are all, I think, very positive things. One very good measurement, I think, and one that's really quite easy for somebody that maybe isn't into ratios and that kind of financial analysis can understand, and that's the per capita debt comparison with other communities. And the independent or the internal auditors included an analysis as well. These are figures that were updated for us by PFM last summer. We're in the process of getting them updated again, so we'll provide you with some more current information in the future. But you can see that by comparison, and I mean, I suppose you can deduct cities if you think some are more appropriate, but you can see those that we commonly compare ourselves with. City of Sioux Falls compares very, very favorably, I believe. With that, I'd like to wrap it up with some comments in terms of my outlook for the future. As I said, we ended 2013 financially very strong. The economy is doing very well. Some of the priorities, or one of the key priorities for our 2014 budget, and as we begin to develop the 2015 budget, it will continue to be a priority, and that is to maintain that financial strength, to not let that become eroded and put us in a weaker position. So that is always at the forefront of all of our financial planning and budgeting that we do. Our community clearly is growing. That's not a surprise to anyone. The focus as we move into the 2015 budget will certainly be to stay ahead of that growth. We are this year in the 2014 budget, a lot of focus has been placed on that. We are investing significantly in public safety, which is a key issue when we look at the growth in our community. As you folks know, Fire Station number 11 will be constructed this year. That's certainly a project that's driven by the growth in our community. We're adding staff in 2014 to both the fire and police departments. And of course, in 2015, one of the priorities will be staffing that new fire station that will be constructed this year. Infrastructure investments, again, to improve traffic flow, will continue to be a priority this year and into the future. And investing in our utility systems, both in the infrastructure and in some of the staffing investments that we're making this year, continue to be a priority. All of those things really relate to the growth that we're experiencing in Sioux Falls and the city's focus on keeping up and staying ahead of that growth. Quality of life, of course, is always at the forefront as well. In 2014, as I mentioned, Prairie West Library, that'll be the first, this is the first full year of operation for the new branch library. We're working this year, and we've already started looking ahead to 2015 and working with our parks team to strengthen their workforce as well. With the low unemployment rate, I think a lot of our departments are feeling the effects of that and finding it more and more challenging to fill open positions. And so we're working in concert with HR and the other departments to try to shore up those areas where we feel like we're having the most challenges in terms of that workforce recruitment. And I know we're all eagerly waiting to see the outcome of the April 8th election in regard to the future of our aquatics facilities here in Sioux Falls. One of the things that really is kind of permeates everything we do in terms of the 14 budget, as well as looking ahead to 2015, is looking for opportunities to change the way we do business and improve on how we deliver services. Some of those things can be very visible to the public. Some of those things are very much out of the public eye. And some of the examples I can give you in 2014 and in 15, we will continue to look for opportunities to centralize and streamline internal operations like the management of our fleet and management of our facilities, custodial services, those types of things. But one example of more of a public something that's in the eye of the public would be the transformation that Public Health Department is undergoing this year with how they are delivering services. And you'll recall we talked extensively about that in the budget process, but that's really geared at increasing the level of service, the quality of services, the quantity of services, and at the same time doing so more efficiently in the process. Some of you folks on the council are working closely with a lot of individuals in the community on our public transit system, and that's certainly going to be a key focus as we roll into the 2015 budget development to try to put our public transit services on a more sustainable path. And last, certainly not least, is improving customer service wherever we can. That's something we look to do, and I think as we went through the 14 budget process, you saw a lot of examples of how we could do that, how we intend to do that, and we will continue to look for those opportunities. So to conclude, the city is very strong today. We are well prepared, certainly from the financial perspective, which is the way I address you today. We're well prepared to meet the challenges of the growing city that we live in, and we'll continue to leverage the financial strength that we have to keep Sioux Falls moving forward. So with those comments, I'd be happy to entertain whatever questions you folks have.
Thank you, Tracy. What is the surplus budget in 2013 projected? I know the audit isn't completely done, but what is that projected surplus?
Are we talking about the capital surplus?
Yes.
As I say, right now, the number that we're reporting is $11.5 million surplus or available funds as of the end of the year. $9.8 million of that is represented by that reimbursement, and that's yet to be determined how you folks want to address that. And a small portion of it, like I say, $350,000 has already been appropriated. So you're really looking at about $11.2 million overall with everything combined as we stand here today of capital funds that are available for appropriation.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the council?
I don't know.
Councilor Jamison, please.
Thank you. Just on that last note, I think what we were trying to figure out or get an exact number on or close to was the new unobligated funds from 2013. Was it roughly 1.4 or 1.5 million? Is that
right?
over and above the core money?
If you ignore the $9.8 million from the core, as of the end of the year, it would be 1.7. You've already appropriated about $300,000, $350,000, so that would leave you about $1.4 million.
If I could, just a couple of questions on that, Tracy. This is the first time we've heard about that number from 2013, right? You haven't shared this number with us before.
Right. This is the first time it's been made public.
I didn't know if you knew about it, but I was told about a survey that was mailed out to some homes asking what we should do with $1.5 million in extra surplus dollars. I can't assume that was part of the city's effort. Was it?
Not that I'm aware of, no. It wouldn't be hard to estimate how much additional sales tax revenues. Any of you folks could have done that. You know what the growth rate was. You know what we budgeted. So it wouldn't be a difficult thing for somebody to estimate how much additional sales tax revenues would have gone into that capital fund.
On the 8%, have we ever had a number that high? Are you able to ever go back?
I think it has been prior to the recession, but 8 is quite high.
That's quite high. I didn't know if there was one higher. That was really it. Thanks.
Councilor Karski?
Tracy, you talked about outstanding and authorized debt, and I'm just looking at page 17 of your long report, and it talks about authorized and not issued amount. And, for example, we have $5 million from a 2008 sales tax, urban conservation, it says, to be paid off in 2015. Tell me about this money. I mean, is it sitting there? It was authorized by past councils. It was never spent. We've got a total of, well, in November it was 21 million, and in December it was 18 million, but I see one of them was paid down, and that had a maturity date of 2020 under water rec. But explain to me how that works, that authorized not issued, and what our options are.
Sure.
Along there.
And the first one you mentioned is kind of an unusual one that's very unique. That is, and that's something that was put into place prior to my time, so I don't know all the history of it. It is really just a line of credit. The city, to my knowledge, has never drawn on that, has never borrowed any funds on that, but it was set up with an original timeline to expire in 2015. It relates to community development, and that they wanted apparently to have a line of credit available to them if opportunities were to present themselves, whether it be related to some sort of a development project or a renovation of a particular neighborhood or part of town. But it really, in the time that I've been here, it really hasn't proven to be something that really lends itself to being used very well. It's not inexpensive in terms of the borrowing rate. I don't remember off the top of my head what that is, but a fairly high rate. So it really has never been utilized. And we just had a conversation yesterday whether or not that should even continue to show up on our report. But I suppose until that expires or until we cancel it, we will continue to show it as at least a source of funding available. The other you mentioned on the water rec, there is some amount that shows up as authorized but not issued. Those would be SRF loans. The state revolving fund loans are approved for a fixed dollar amount, but we don't actually receive any of those dollars until we spend them on the particular project. So some of those projects that are ongoing, that are being financed with SRF loans, we will periodically draw those down, and so you'll see those numbers change.
So based on that then, on that first $5 million that you talked about, it's like debt we never spent, so we never committed it. Right. But under the water rec, are we being charged interest on money that we never took then?
No, we only get charged interest when we draw the money down from the point where we actually make a draw request for reimbursement.
But we are counting it as debt even though we haven't used it.
Well, that's why it is distinguished from outstanding debt or the issue amount, which you see in the next column. Those are the amounts that we've actually drawn down and owe, but have not yet paid back. The authorized but not issued is just funding that's available to us. Some of those, it's not uncommon to leave some of that money on the table, so to speak, where that it never does get drawn down. And then there's a process where the city will release it back to the state so they can loan it to somebody else.
Thank you.
Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, Tracy. I'm interested, I think there was a little article in the paper, and then also some of my, not concerns, but my interest is the new financial management system. You indicated here today it's going to give you some efficiencies and some savings. Have you put any numbers to that, a pencil to it to figure out what that really is going to do? And I know you said it's going to take a while to do that, but what, just for the people here too, what are some of those savings? What are some of the good things about implementing that?
Sure. And I think in order to really get a feel for it, you have to understand that the system we're coming from is really quite archaic. The city hasn't upgraded it, or gone to a new upgraded modern software system. It's been 20 years, I think. So it's really outdated. There's been a lot of advancements and improvements in technology, as you know, in the last 15, 20 years. So it's really like going from the horse and buggy days to to modern era in terms of the technology that we have. We're today very paper driven. There's just an incredible amount of paper that gets shuffled around for any particular project or process that needs to be reviewed by multiple departments. A lot of that will be going away with this new system. The and in conjunction with the new software, we're also changing some of the business practices that we have. For example, purchasing has historically been done out in the departments, so they would actually be issuing their own purchase orders. All that is being centralized through the city's purchasing office, and so that's the way the software works, and that's the way that makes the most sense to really get the most bang for the buck when it comes time to procure goods or services, so that we can have one centralized look at what departments are buying, what kinds of goods or services or materials and supplies, and really leverage that quantity and effectiveness to gain efficiency. So I think the biggest impact we'll see is really on the data entry. There's a lot of that will be going by the wayside in the area of payroll. Eventually, and this hasn't been completely rolled out, but employees will be entering their own time into the system rather than filling out a paper timesheet that then is keyed in by somebody else and reviewed by another person. So all that is going to be streamlined and automated. Again, the purchasing process, the bidding, competitive bidding for equipment and materials and supplies will all be done online. So vendors that are interested in bidding will be submitting their bids electronically. All that's done automatically rather than mailing lots of paper back and forth. It's tabulated electronically. So there's really a tremendous amount of efficiency in our purchasing that we'll be able to capture as well. And really, I think those are all great. I think there are a lot of really good efficiencies there, but I think the one thing that a new system will give us is really better information. It's going to be more timely information. It will be much closer to real time than what we have today, where some of the information that our departments get are weeks and weeks old before they get it, or by the time they get it. So we'll have the opportunity to really make a lot better decisions from a management perspective out in the departments, so they will know where they stand. They'll be in a much better position to manage their budgets effectively.
Are there any other questions for Tracy? Yes, Councilor Rippenbach, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. This is always a good report. This is kind of an off-the-wall question I should have asked earlier, but the question I'm getting from folks now is, what's the snow budget line item look like, the snow removal budget? Are we good? I mean, it seems like we're just getting an email from Mark talking about how much de-icing we've used because it's all been little bits of snow.
Right.
Can you, just in a nutshell, are we still okay for this year?
Yes. Yeah, and I really haven't spent a lot of time looking at the 14 information because of course, as of the first of the year, we start with a whole new year's worth of snow removal budget. So that's really, it would be a far more extreme year than what we've had so far this year before we would be concerned about snow removal in March.
Well, and I think that's what we forget is that our budget, the city budget, runs January to December. The snow removal budget runs, September to July. Yeah, so it just kind of, we kind of forget that, oh yeah, it did roll over the 1st of January, but good, thank you.
The months that we tend to worry about snow removal are in November and December when we don't know what's coming, and by the time we know it's here, there's the potential to not have enough time to really react from a budgetary standpoint.
Right, good, thank you.
Yes.
Piggybacking on her question then, when will we receive our first financial report for 2014?
Thank you. Yeah, good question. I'll be back in a month, next month, to report, and then we'll begin to go again on a regular monthly basis.
Please, Sue.
Also, I'm wondering, we're having a work session on April 10th regarding the surplus. Will we be receiving the recommendations of the administration, the different departments at that time or prior to that time?
I would hope to be able to share that information with you well in advance of the time you sit down to have a meeting, in order to make your meeting time more productive. We've already put out the request to the directors. I did that today, asking them to be notifying me and bringing to our attention those projects that they would like for you folks to consider going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Tracy at this time? Okay. Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you. Is there any other business to come before the City Council, councilors? before we adjourn? There being none, I will adjourn this meeting. Just a quick reminder that we will be back in 10 minutes for the Public Services Committee. Thank you.